It's early September 1983. You probably just finished your first week of school. A rabid dog, a flashy dancer, and two for John Hughes are ruling the movie scene. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget the bell. This Week in the 80s starts now. There were a lot of great movies in 1983, and September didn't let us down. Number 13 on the box office list this week was Cujo. The dog part was played by three different St. Bernards and a mechanical one. The child actor is Danny Paturo, who went on to be Jonathan Bauer on Who's the Boss. Oftentimes when a book gets turned into a movie, everyone always says the same thing. Oh, the book was better, the book was better. And they blame the screenwriters and the directors and everybody involved with the movie for screwing it up. In this case, with Cujo, it was Stephen King who wrote the original screenplay and changed the story all around. Many of the deviations you see in the movie were Stephen King's idea. One of the creepy parts of Cujo is all the fog that's around. At one point, that industrial fog machine created such a cloud that locals called the fire department because they thought the forest was on fire. At number 12, we've got Strange Brew. That's Bob and Doug McKenzie with their hijinks from the north. Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis were super popular on SCTV, which is basically the Canadian version of Saturday Night Live. They released an album, a record if you will, and it sold 1 million copies. So of course, everyone wants to capitalize on their popularity at the time. They got a movie deal. One of the big breweries in Canada is Molson, and they wanted to be involved. They thought it would be great if they filmed part of Strange Brew in the brewery. Here's the problem. When Molson heard about one of the scenes that has a mouse found in a beer bottle, they were no longer so thrilled with the idea and pulled the plug on Strange Brew filming in one of their breweries. Bob and Doug had to go somewhere else to pull their gags.
Next on the list is Hercules.
Hercules had a unique storyline. Big muscly dude has to save the princess from the bad guys. Big muscly dudes weren't too difficult to find in 1983. They settled on Lou Ferrigno. The damsel in distress was Sybil Danning. Unless you're a fan of basically terrible B movies, you probably don't know who Sybil Danning is. Hercules was nominated for and won many awards. It was nominated for Worst Actor, Worst New Star, Worst Supporting Actress, Worst Screenplay, and Worst Movie. It won the Razzie for Worst Supporting Actress and Worst Screenplay. Nice job, Hercules. At 10, we've got War Games. Would you like to play a game? It's my best. Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy and Nuclear War. It doesn't get much more 80s than that. When they were developing this film in the late 70s, they named Dr. Falcon after Stephen Hawking. They changed it a little bit, but you can see where it came from. The character of Dr. Falcon isn't really played on the screen by one of the characters. They put a movie in and they watch him on video cassette. Somehow John Lennon found out about the movie, loved the script, and wanted to be in it. Dr. Falcon seemed like a fun role for him to play. Unfortunately, that was in the late 70s. They didn't start filming it until 1982. And by that time, that loser had shot John Lennon. At number 9, we've got Stayin Alive. Stayin Alive was co-written by Sylvester Stallone. Stallone wrote a lot of movies. He wrote all the Rambos, all the Rockies, the Expendables, Over the Top, Cliffhanger, Cobra, the list goes on. Now, in 1983, disco was dead. Or was it? Travolta's back as Tony Manero, and it made $127 million on a $22 million budget. Maybe disco wasn't dead. It's dead now for sure. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has an approval rating of 0. It's the oldest movie to have a 0 approval rating. I gotta be honest, listen, I haven't seen it. I never want to see it. Early 80s John Travolta dancing with the Bee Gees playing, I'm out. On many lists, Stayin Alive is the worst sequel of all time. On the bright side, Frank Stallone, Sylvester's brother, came away with the hit Far From Over. That got to number 10 on the Billboard charts. At number 8, we've got Trading Places. Trading Places was supposed to be Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. The only problem was Richard Pryor had set his face on fire freebasing cocaine, so they had to come up with a different plan. They didn't want it to appear as though Eddie Murphy was replacing Richard Pryor, so they couldn't go with Pryor and Murphy. Instead, they cast Dan Aykroyd and then picked up Eddie Murphy afterward. The producers wanted Jamie Lee Curtis for the female lead. Up to this point, she was nothing more than a scream queen. Producers insisted on having her. The studio execs finally agreed. Jamie Lee Curtis put on a show to superstardom. With 17 weeks in the top 10, Trading Places was the 4th highest grossing film of 1983. At 7, we've got Flashdance. Brian De Palma had signed on to direct Flashdance. He decided to remove himself from the project when he got one that he wanted to work on even more. It ended up being Scarface. Not a bad idea. A lot of the solo dance scenes are filmed in dimly lit areas. Part of the reason was because of all the body doubles they used to get the shots that they wanted. Jennifer Beals did a lot of that dancing, but she certainly didn't do all of it. One of the body doubles is a guy. Roger Ebert buried this movie with 1.5 stars out of 4, which makes sense because the Golden Globes nominated it for Best Film. My favorite part of the casting notes is that Gene Simmons was offered the role of Nick Hurley. Imagine if Gene Simmons was in Flashdance. He turned it down because Nick Hurley didn't fit Gene's demon persona. The woman who originally wrote the story of Flashdance sold it to Paramount Pictures for $2,300. It made the studio $150 million. Pretty good buy for Paramount. At 6, we've got Return of the Jedi. Jabba the Hutt is fat, he's gross, he's disgusting, and he's hysterical. Wait, you already know that. What you don't know is that it cost them $500,000 to make the Jabba the Hutt character. There are a bunch of guys inside Jabba making a move and do all the things that Jabba does, and a bunch of electronics and mechanics as well. At one point, when Princess Leia is jumping over Jabba to go strangle him, she stepped on the Jabba character, her heel went through it, and injured one of the guys inside. The original name of the movie is Return of the Jedi. Some know-it-alls convinced George Lucas that Return of the Jedi wasn't fierce enough, and pushed for it to be called Revenge of the Jedi. Lucas agreed, let's call it Revenge of the Jedi. Most of the filming is made with the movie called Revenge of the Jedi. Close to the end of it, Lucas realizes that Jedis don't seek revenge. This movie name makes no sense. It goes back to Return of the Jedi. They did reuse the idea later in the first trilogy with Revenge of the Sith, which actually does make sense. Return of the Jedi was the first movie to use the THX designation. THX doesn't stand for the size of the speakers or how loud it can be. It's the actual configuration. When you're seeing a movie with the THX designation, you know that the specs are correct for how Lucas wanted you to hear that film. When Princess Leia is in the bounty hunter gear in Jabba's lair, that voice is Pat Welch. Pat Welch, who also did the voice of my buddy E.T. At number 5, it's Easy Money with Rodney Dangerfield. I'm a huge Rodney Dangerfield fan. Rodney Dangerfield makes you laugh just by standing there. He adjusts his tie, and that in itself is just funny. Rodney Dangerfield in his first lead role had to be a great movie. Everyone agreed, and Easy Money opened at number 1, knocking Clark W. Griswold down the list. In Easy Money, Rodney Dangerfield and Joe Pesci play basically who you think Rodney Dangerfield and Joe Pesci would be if they weren't Hollywood stars. Rodney Dangerfield drinks too much, he smokes too much, and he's a salesman. Joe Pesci is a hot-tempered plumber. If you haven't seen Easy Money, but you have seen Rodney's other top 80s movie, Back to School, it's basically the same character, except he's not as rich in this one.
Billy Joel wrote the theme song for this movie. In return, Rodney appeared in the Tell Her About It video. Number 4 on the list, the aforementioned Clark W. Griswold in National Lampoon's Vacation. It took them 55 days to shoot this movie. During that time, Anthony Michael Hall, who plays Rusty Griswold, was going through puberty, and he grew 3 inches. The original ending of National Lampoon's Vacation had the Griswolds going to Wally's house and holding his family hostage. Test audiences didn't really like that part of the movie. Harold Ramis was the director, Egon from Ghostbusters. He realized that we had waited this entire movie for the Griswolds to get to Wally World, and now we don't get that, so the payoff wasn't there. They rewrote the ending, they get to go on all the rides, they saved the hostage taking for Christmas Vacation. In the 80s, I went to the movies all the time. And as soon as we got a VCR at home, I rented movies all the time. I spent a ton of time as a kid
watching movies. It's really uncommon for a movie to hit one of these lists that I'm covering that I've never heard of, but here one is.
At number 3 this week, we've got a movie called Nightmares. It's a 4-part anthology. It showed up, they pumped it up, it got to number 3, and then it just fell to the earth. I had to do a bunch of research on it because I had never even heard of it. I thought it was a bunch of typos and maybe it was a Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that. It wasn't. It's just called Nightmares. Initially, it was supposed to be a 2-hour pilot for a show on NBC. They decided to release it as a feature film instead. Notable names in this include Emilio Estevez and nobody else. I just don't have anything else to tell you about this one. I'm honestly having a hard time believing that it exists. At number 2, we've got Risky Business. Coming off his success from The Outsiders, Tom Cruise plays Joel Goodson. He wasn't the only person that auditioned for it though. Michael J. Fox, Tom Hanks, and Nicolas Cage all tried out for the part. What a different movie that would have been if Tom Hanks was playing Joel Goodson. Risky Business is the film debut of Bronson Pinchot, Don't Be Ridiculous, and Megan Mullally. Risky Business cost them $6 million to make and ended up raking in over $60 million. This was the role that shot Tom Cruise into superstardom. He only got paid $75,000 to be Joel Goodson. Now, that's more than I'm going to make being Paul Mackinac on this show, but we'll talk about that some other time. From Risky Business at $75,000, he was on to Legend, where he made $500,000. After that, Top Gun, $2 million. Right to the top. Number 1 for this week in September of 1983, John Hughes and Michael Keaton give us Mr. Mom. John Hughes had been left home to care for his kids while his wife was out of town. It did not go well. He was telling the story to one of his friends who found it really funny. A light went on and he wrote the movie. At the time, John Hughes had a television deal with Aaron Spelling. So Mr. Mom was supposed to be a TV movie. The studios took a closer look at it and decided to make it a feature film. John Hughes loves working in Chicago. He does not like to hobnob with the Hollywood people. So he wanted to direct it in Chicago. Hollywood said, "We're directing it here, John. You're fired. We're bringing in somebody else." John Hughes went back to Chicago and directed 16 Candles instead, so it wasn't really that bad of a day for him. It's early September in 1982. No, it's not. The dog part was played by 3 different St. Bernards. St. Bernard. Which makes sense considering the Golden Glows the Golden Glows. It's glowing like the sun. The justices, my precious. He adjusts his tie, wiggles his eyes. Number 4, I just covered. This is number 3. At least I can count. A light went off, he wrote a movie. Light went off, light should go on. Hold on, before you go, click that to subscribe to the channel, and click that and watch the next show. I'll see you soon.